Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to do another video about the movie adaptation of the Broadway play Wicked. Now, for those that don't know, Wicked is an adaptation or a prequel, if you will, of the 1939 movie The Wizard of Oz, which itself is based on the 1900, the book that came out in 1900, L. Frank Baum's book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, set in the Oz universe. Now, the original book of Wicked came out in 1995. Um, and basically, the author wanted to tell a story. He was a huge fan of the 1939 movie, and he wanted to tell the story of how the Wicked Witch of the West became the Wicked Witch of the West. Basically, the origins of evil. Are people born evil, or are they? Do they become evil? And what he was inspired by was the 1990 invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein and by this tragedy in England that happened uh, where these two kids were murdered by this other kid in their class. You know what I mean? So he wanted to explore those themes, and that's exactly what the book Wicked explores, and later the musical as well. Um, what makes somebody evil? When I first um, became aware of Wicked was, I'll be honest, through Glee. Even though I live in New York City and sometimes I would visit Manhattan, and when it was popular, the play came out in 2003. You would go downtown, you know, well, to Times Square where all the plays are. And at that time in 2008, Lisa and I went to see In the Heights, and we would see the billboard for Wicked. You know what I mean? But because it was so popular, even though it was snubbed at the Tonys in 2004, a year after it came out, it was snubbed at the Tonys and didn't receive Best Musical Award. It was huge. It was a huge play, and the problem is when it comes to plays and when it comes to musicals, a lot of people, the more popular they become, the more expensive they become. Similar thing happened with Hamilton years ago. Happened with the longest running play in Broadway history, Cats, Andrew Lloyd Webber's uh, play. So I never got a chance to see it. You know what I mean? Even though I saw the billboard for it, because, like I said, when things become really popular like that, plays they become inexpensive. So from being a fan of the show Glee, which I discovered after it debuted in 2009, I discovered it like in 2010, 2011 through Netflix, and my girlfriend who later became my fiance, Vanessa at the time, was uh, a fan of Glee. She introduced me to Glee, and I started to watch it. And of course, you have that episode in season one where Chris Colfer is in a sing-off with um, Leah Michelle's character Rachel Berry, and they're singing "Defying Gravity." So I like the song "Defying Gravity." So I looked into where it's from, and I discovered Wicked. And then you have that other episode, I think in the later seasons, I think it was season three, where they visit New York and she sings for good. She and Kurt sing for good. So I discovered the musical, and then I discovered the source material. I also watched the L. Frank Baum uh, movie starring John Ritter from 1990 that came out on the life of L. Frank Baum and the PBS documentary on L. Frank Baum. But anyway, I always wanted to see it. I love the songs from it, but I never got the chance. So now that the movie's come out, starring Ariana Grande as Glindola and um, Cynthia Erivo as the Wicked Witch of the West, Elphaba, I knew I had to see it. So here's my thoughts of it. Spoiler alert: there will be some spoilers. It starts off uh, with Elphaba being born. Just a quick note, guys. Elphaba, the name Elphaba is from the initials of L. Frank Baum, the writer of The Wizard of Oz, so it's paying tribute to him. Gregory Maguire, the guy who wrote it, designed it that way. Anyway, she's born with green skin. So, being as though she's born with green skin, everybody looks at her weird, as she's a kid growing up because her mom gives birth to her, and everybody's shocked, when she's born with this odd thing, green skin. So, uh, the parents are horrified, but they don't put her away or anything. They let her exist in the society in Oz, and she grows up, and she's a bright, intelligent girl. She has a gift for magic, but nobody knows it. Like only like when she gets like real mad, she'll display her magic. But the real enthusiast to when it comes to magic in the family is her sister Nessa Rose, played by Marissa Baudet. Well, Marissa Baudet, I think it's Baudet, pronounced Baudet, whatever. But anyway, she plays the character of the sister. Now, the sister, being that she has a interest in magic, she wants to attend this university, Shiz. So basically, what Shiz is like, um, uh, the Harry Potter University. They study magic and stuff, and they know that Nessa Rose has this gift for magic, but so she goes to this Hogwarts type place. But the father is concerned for how Nessa Rose will be treated because Nessa Rose is wheelchair bound. She is in a wheelchair. She's a wheelchair user, and they don't want her to be teased, and she's never really been alone. So basically, they're telling Elphaba to attend the school with her, even though Elphaba is not even enrolled as a student. She attends the school anyway. But the the teacher there finds out that Elphaba is good at magic. So here's Elphaba. She's been teased her whole life. She's green skinned, and nobody's paying her any attention. Nobody's approaching her, nothing. And except for Glindola. Now, Glindola is different in a way that she's like rich, she's popular, she's like in any teen comedy that you would see, like one of those really bitchy girls types, like the girls from Mean Girls, basically. She's one of those. And she played by Ariana Grande. And of course, she completely ignores um, Elphaba. Now, in the beginning, right? I'm gonna backtrack a little bit because I'm talking about when they first went to Shiz, the university. But in the very, very beginning of the play, it starts off where Wizard of Oz, the movie, left off. Wizard of Oz, of course, the movie, 1939 version, and the story in 1900, 30 years before that, start leaves off with the Wicked Witch of the West dying because she's melting. Everybody knows I'm melting because they threw water on her, right? So everybody in Munchkinland is happy that she died. So they ask Glindola, who's the Wicked Witch, the Good Witch rather, from the movie if she knew her, and she goes, and then that's when they go into the flashback. So originally, they start off as adversaries because uh, they put them together as roommates, and each of them is writing to their families back of how they hate they hate each other. They're two different personalities. Elphaba is very studious. She takes her studies really studious. I'm really serious. She is socially conscious, as we see later on, in how she helps with the persecution of certain beings in Oz, particularly animals. We'll get to that later. But she really takes her life, whereas like Glindola is like an airhead. She's mean, she's conceited. All she cares about is really popularity and guys, and she's a real bitch basically. Uh, in the story, she is nothing like what she is portrayed in the 1939 version. So, but anyway, Elphaba feels like she wants to escape this green skin. She wants to escape this infliction upon her. So she has the song "The Wizard and Me." She feels like when she finally meets the Wizard of Oz, that she will get green. She will get rid of this green skin. Now, needless to say, that doesn't happen. So she's at Shiz attending university, and there's this guy Bach, Bach Woodsman. Now, obviously, we know that just from his name alone, Bach will eventually become the Tin Man, the Tin Woodsman, but we don't know how. But he approaches Glindola. He's kind of a nerdy-ish type. He has this huge thing for Glindola. He wants to really be together with her, right? But it's kind of a pretty in pink situation, where he likes her, but she doesn't like him back. She's more into this guy Fiyero, right? Who comes to the school later, who in the future will become the Scarecrow. But he's not in Shiz yet, but initially. So it starts off with these two as enemies. Like, and Nessa Rose, she'll be the Wicked Witch of the East. She'll be the one who had the glass slippers that Dorothy takes when Dorothy comes to Oz. She doesn't. She doesn't really do much of anything, really, to be honest with you. But in the beginning, right? It's not till later when Fiyero gets to the school and he sings the song "Dancing Through Life." Basically, he's basically a popular boy type. He doesn't care. He's kind of a bad boyish. He wants to go to the Ozdust Ballroom, which is basically a club that students that attend Shiz are not permitted to go to. And they go to this club later on. Elphaba shows up at this club and she does her dance and everybody laughs at her. But then Glindola is um, starting to be changed by Elphaba because she's seeing Elphaba's kindness. She's seeing Elphaba's social conscious um, come to fruition, and she's starting to be changed by it. Whereas Elphaba is also starting to be changed by what she's seeing as injustices in the world. And one of the particular injustices, there's a the history professor at Shiz is Dr. Dilliman. Dr. Dilliman, I think, yeah, Dr. Dilliman, Dilliman is pronounced. He's a goat, right? And there was a time in Oz where animals were some of the most respected scholars in the Oz universe. But as of recent developments, animals are being persecuted. Animals are being locked away in jails. It's sort of like take Oz as take the land of Oz as an allegory and apply it to 1930s Germany. Prior to Hitler's ascension to power in the 1930s in Germany, Jewish people were some of the most respected scholars in the world. Jewish people were fully integrated into Germans and German Jewish scholars. Jewish people were fully integrated into Germany at the time. It wasn't until later, as Hitler began to enact these Nuremberg laws, that things started to really change. And some of the educators that were predominantly Jewish at the time were then locked into concentration camps. And that's exactly what's happening to animals in Oz. But they don't really know why. They're not necessarily keen on why this is happening. But all Elphaba knows because she follows Dr. Dillerman back to his home where he meets with this clandestine group of animals, which is basically a resistance against the government tyranny that's going on against them, right? The oppression that's going on against them. And she discovers it, and she feels like there's something she has to do, especially when he's kicked out of the university, and um, the other professor that comes to replace her is wanting to do experiments on this lion cub. Now, the lion cub, as we know, will become the cowardly lion in the Wizard of Oz. But Elphaba and even Fiyero is a guy. Think of Fiyero like this: he didn't care anything about politics, nothing about social issues, anything. He didn't have a conscience. He was just a popular, handsome guy, typical airhead type guy that was just worried about popularity. And now through Elphaba, he is becoming influenced and becoming aware of social issues, the social issue of the day in Oz, the persecution of animals. So he, with her, hatches a plan to finally go to see the wizard. And through her connection with this teacher, her being a prize student, her being um, so good at her magic, the teacher favors her and wants her to go to see the wizard. So she finally goes to see the wizard, and she discovers that it's the Wizard of Oz that is is oppressing these animals. You know what I mean? It's him who forces his monkey guards to get wings, basically enslaving them with these wings. And Elphaba finally breaks them free, and Elphaba finally um, rebels against the wizard, rebels against his tyranny. So here's this guy, the wizard, who they're looking up to as this moral paradigm, as this generous leader, but meanwhile he's this dictator. Now, uh, oppressing. He's like a Hitler type. He's like a Mussolini. He's like, well, I'm not gonna go into Orange Man Bad, you know, uh, but he's like Orange Man. you know, and she is actually good. She's actually rebelling against him, right? And then they declare her as the evil one, the wicked witch. So that's basically, and then she flies up in the air and they sing Define Gravity. But that's the story. So, how does it differ from the original Wizard of Oz? Of course, in the original Wizard of Oz as well, the wizard is discovered to be just a charlatan, just a con man, right? But here it's much more sinister. Here in Wicked, he's not just a con man. He's not just a a charlatan, trying to pull one over on the people, right? And he's really a guy who arrived in a hot air balloon from Kansas, right? The same area of the country that Dorothy was originally from. He's not just that. He's actually really demonic. He's actually really authoritarian. You know, but both the Wizard of Oz original and Wicked both expose an allegory, if you will, for corruption leadership. One, incompetent corruption, as in The Wizard of Oz. The other, malevolent corruption or malevolent leadership, as in Wicked. Because when L. Frank Baum wrote the original Wizard of Oz in the 1890s, he was living in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and at that time, the president of the United States, who was not Franklin, Theodore Roosevelt, was trying to. There was a big debate in the country about what type of money would we use, and some people were saying the gold standard. Some people were for bimetallism, which was silver and gold, and other people were for paper money, greenbacks. So, in the color scheme in Oz, the original story, Emerald City, the book, Emerald City is a representation of greenback money. The yellow brick road is a representation of gold, and the silver slippers are a representation of the silver bullion, the silver money. Needless to say, L. Frank Baum, he was political, he was very political. He his mother-in-law that financed the publication of the movie originally was a suffragette, meaning that she was advocating for a national amendment at the time, which would eventually in 1920 become the 19th Amendment for women's rights, a woman's right to vote. She was a suffragette. In fact, when he met his wife, he didn't want to actually speak to his wife because he thought that the mother was a famed suffragette. At that time, he was thinking, damn, you know, she might hate men. She might be an ultra feminist, right? This was first rate feminist. This was the suffragettes, but she didn't. And that's part of the reason too why because he would tell the little stories, the man in the magic land, for example, to his child. He start off by telling them because he was a failed actor, L. Frank Baum, a failed Shakespearean actor. So he would tell his kids these stories, and little by little he would embellish. And originally, the main character, the protagonist of the story, was a boy, but because he was influenced a lot by his mother-in-law's political views as a suffragette, he eventually made the character a girl. So he was very political. He was very which would be progressive or leftist at the time, and he basically believed in bimetallism. He believed that the West, the citizens of the Western states, would be better off and would have more rights and more liberties in their hands if they did not completely switch to fiat currency of greenbacks or the gold standards, but had a standard that was both silver and gold. So he was basically against, eliminating the silver standard, as it were. And he kind of wrote The Wizard of Oz in that sort of way. Influenced by his mother-in-law's political views. He had a very controversial view of Native Americans. He actually was anti-Native American in a sense, and some people believe that the flying monkeys in the Wizard of Oz are an allegory to Native American life, where it's once they roamed free, but now they were enslaved. He kind of believed that the expansion westward was, you know, infringing upon their rights and causing them more problems than helping them. So he was basically, and that's why the Kansas was chosen. Kansas, as many people know, throughout the 19th century was a symbol of freedom, a symbol of independence, a symbol of open-mindedness to many people on the left wing of the political spectrum in the 19th century, such as L. Frank Baum was. And Gregory Maguire, as well, the author of Wicked, was also inspired by politics, but in a different way. Whereas L. Frank Baum was exploring how the innocence of the West, the West meaning the Western states and territories, was being corrupted by those back east or those in the South, right? And the purity is represented by the young girl Dorothy. Um, uh, Gregory Maguire also deals with how people become corrupt, but how does a good person become evil? The origins of evil. Something similar. I have this essay on Facebook where I compare the characters of Anakin Skywalker and Elphaba from Wicked. They're very similar. They start off as political idealists. They start off as social justice warriors, but eventually they become consumed with their own efforts in the pursuit of social justice. Eventually become evil. So whereas Gregory Maguire deals with the origins of evil, L. Frank Baum deals with the corruption of the innocents through politics, through the political apparatus, not the not personal fulfillment, as it were. But they both deal with the corruption of evil. Whereas Dorothy is like Luke Skywalker. Dorothy doesn't become corrupted. Doesn't She remains on the faithful path. Star Wars is very similar, and you can see the influence of Star Wars and the influence of Wizard of Oz on Star Wars in a lot of ways. Tatooine is like a space version of Kansas, a homesteading outpost outside of the main confines of civilization, just as Kansas is. And Luke Skywalker, similarly, is presented with these challenges and along the way meets a group of friends, whereas Dorothy meets the Tin Woodsman, Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion. Luke Skywalker meets a hairy guy, Chewbacca, a hunk of metal, C3PO. He already has his companion instead of his dog Toto. He has C3PO. He has R2D2, and then he meets other people along the way. So you could see how George Lucas was influenced by that. Of course, why wouldn't he be? The thing was, when L. Frank Baum set out to write The Wizard of Oz, America was wasn't really a brand new country, but it was relatively new, and it didn't have the traditions of like Hansel and Gretel or those type of fairy tales that European society had. So that's how Frank Baum created Wicked. Created The Wizard of Oz, rather. as a version of an American sort of fairy tale, and it took off pretty well. And Wicked, of course, builds upon that lore. Now, this is Wicked Part One. They are going to come out apparently with a Wicked Part Two. But what did I think of the film? I thought it was a brilliant film. It really touched me a lot because the actress Marissa Bode, she is disabled. She became disabled at an early age, and they don't shy away from pointing out her disability in the movie. As a matter of fact, it is Glendula who convinces Bach to ask her out. Despite her being, they say that she's tragically beautiful. They use the phrase tragically beautiful because here she is beautiful, but she's in a wheelchair, you know? And that really touched me because I'm in a wheelchair. You know what I mean? So that was personal for me. And I don't know about tragically beautiful, but Justin, hey, I'm I have been the victim of social ostracization. So like the fact that this story is dealing with uh, social ostracization and how social ostracization can turn a person wicked, can turn a person evil. Teasing and bullying can turn a person evil. Um, or a group of people evil. And where does evil start and good begin? I mean, how do we judge what is evil in society? You know, what Gregory Maguire did was he took the most maligned character in the original story, s- somebody who we don't even get a backstory necessarily of in the original story. She's kind of one dimensional, right? Margaret Hamilton plays her perfect in the 1939 version. But we don't get a backstory for her, and this kind of fills in her backstory, what made her what she is. It questions, where does evil come from? What are the origins of evil? What makes a person evil? Because even the most evil people in history, hey Justin, what's going on? Even the most evil people in history, we they didn't start off evil. They weren't born evil. Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot, Mao. They weren't born evil. Something happened to them. Some kind of trauma in their life made them that. So I like how this story examines that whole phenomenon. Interesting, interesting. Because I always liked when Christmas time when the Wizard of Oz would come on because how they go from black and white to color. It was like one of the first colored movies that ever came out. It went to like four or five different directors, the original, and this one had some backstage issues as well. Wicked had backstage issues because it was canceled. It was supposed to come out earlier, but it was canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So just like the original, it has some shenanigans. Of course, this is not the only Wizard of Oz prequel. There is the Wonderful Wizard of, the movie with James Franco that came out in 2013, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which also, kind of touches on physical disabilities and kind of portrays the wizard as more of a charlatan type, keeping with the original story more than like this evil dictator like this one portrays. But anyway, and of course, there's the 1985 version, Return to Oz, which deals with how Dorothy's family treats her after she confesses to them she went to a place called Oz. And then when she returns, Oz is all broken up, controlled by this evil gang, the Wheelers, you know, that Disney put out in '85, which scared the shit out of me when I watched the sequel. Like, So I've always really been a fan of the material, and I'm glad I got to see it. I give it a 5 out of 7. Possibly the only thing I really didn't like was that it assumes that you're familiar with the source material, I guess, and why wouldn't you be? It's a ubiquitous story, but they don't go into any of the origins of any of the characters. Just kind of drops us in the middle of the plot, but I guess that's how this works. It's interesting that we talked about this before in the channel, how they're humanizing villains. Cruella Deville movie, Star Wars prequels, and this. You know, whereas the villains before were like just one-dimensional characters. Now they're exploring their origins. They're exploring what made them evil. But I think this delves into it on a more psychological level, which I like, and how friends can be torn apart by political disagreements, which is basically happened in the 2016 election, and it's kind of happening now in the 2024 election. Anyway, guys, I enjoyed this movie. The best songs, of course, Defying Gravity, Popular, and Dancing Through Life, because I was kind of like a student, like Fierro in the story. I was dancing through life. I really didn't care. Really didn't give a shit about school necessarily. But as you grow older, you realize that if you don't have a brain, as he later didn't have a brain, you wouldn't succeed. I find it interesting too that the Tim Woodsman didn't have a heart. It has a lot to do with how he does the sister, which they go into as far as in their relationship, why he was later turned into the Tim Woodsman and why he didn't have a heart. Anyway, peace, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Yeah, Aisha, what's up? How you doing? Love you guys. Peace.